But the sorrow with which art fills us both purifies and initiates. If I may quote once more from the great art critic of the Greeks, it is through art and through art only that we can realize our perfection. Through art and through art only that we can realize that we can shield ourselves from the sordid perils of actual existence. This results not merely from the fact that nothing that one can imagine is worth doing, and that one can imagine everything, but from the subtle law that emotional forces, like the forces of the physical sphere, are limited in extent and energy. One can feel so much and no more, and how can it matter with what pleasure life tries to tempt one, or with what pain it seeks to maim and mar one's soul, if in the spectacle of the lives of those who have never existed one has found the true secret of joy, and wept away one's tears over their deaths, who, like Cordelia and the daughter of Brabantio, can never die. Stop a moment. It seems to me that in everything that you have said, there is something radically immoral. All art is immoral. All art? Yes. For the emotion For emotion for the sake of emotion is the aim of art, and emotion for the sake of emotion is the aim of life. And of that practical organization of life we call society. Society, which is the beginning and basis of morals, exists simply for the concentration of human energy. And in order to ensure its own continuance and healthy stability, it demands, and no doubt rightly demands, of each of its citizens that he should contribute some form of productive labor to the common weal, and toil and travail that the day's work may be done. Society often forgives the criminal, it never forgives the dreamer. The beautiful sterile emotions that art excites in us are hateful in its eyes, and so completely are people dominated by the tyranny of this dreadful social ideal that they are always coming shamelessly up to one at private views and other places that are open to the general public and saying in a loud, stentorian voice, "What are you doing?" Whereas, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Is the only question that any civilized being should ever be allowed to whisper to one another. They mean well, no doubt, these honest, beaming folk. Perhaps that is the reason why they are so excessively tedious. But someone should teach them that while in the opinion of society contemplation is the gravest sin which any citizen can be guilty, in the opinion of the highest culture it is the proper occupation of man. Contemplation? Contemplation. I said to you some time ago that it was far more difficult to talk about a thing than to do it. Let me say to you now that to do nothing at all is the most difficult thing in the world, the most difficult and the most intellectual. To Plato, with his passion for wisdom, this was the noblest form of energy. To Aristotle, with his passion for knowledge, this was the noblest form of energy also. It was to this that the passion for holiness led the saint and the mystic of the medieval days. We exist, then, to do nothing? It is to do nothing that the elect exist. Action is limited and relative. Unlimited and absolute is the vision of him who sits at ease and watches, who walks in loneliness and dreams. But we who are born at the close of this wonderful age are at once too cultured and too critical, too intellectually subtle and too curious of exquisite pleasures, to accept any speculations about life in exchange for life itself. To us, the Città Divina, heavenly city, is colorless, and the fruitio Dei, enjoyment of God, without meaning. Metaphysics do not satisfy our temperaments, and religious ecstasy is out of date. The world through which the academic philosopher becomes the spectator of all time and of all existence is not really an ideal world, but simply a world of abstract ideas. When we encounter it, we starve amidst the chill mathematics of thought. The courts of the city of God are not open to us now. Its gates are guarded by ignorance, and to pass them we have to surrender all that in our nature is most divine. It is enough that our fathers believed. They have exhausted the faith faculty of the species. Their legacy to us is the skepticism of which they were afraid. Had they put it into words, it might not live within us as thought. No, Ernest, no, we cannot go back to the saint. There is far more to be learned from the sinner. We cannot go back to philosopher, and the mystic leads us astray, who, as Mr. Pater suggests somewhere, would exchange the curve of a single rose leaf for that formless intangible being which Plato raised so high. What to us is the illumination of Philo, the abyss of Eckhart, the vision of Boehme, the monstrous heaven itself that was revealed to Swedenborg's blinded eyes? Such things are less than the yellow trumpet of one daffodil of the field, far less than the meanest of the visible arts, for just as nature is matter struggling into mind, so art is mind expressing itself under the conditions of matter. And thus, even in the lowliest of her manifestations, she speaks to both sense and soul alike. 'Tis the aesthetic temperament, the vague is always repellent. The Greeks were a nation of artists because they were spared the sense of the infinite. Like Aristotle, like Goethe after he had read Kant, we desire the concrete, and nothing but the concrete can satisfy us. What then do you propose? It seemed to me that with the development of the critical spirit, we shall be able to realize not merely in our own lives, but in the collective life of the race, and so to make ourselves absolutely modern in the true meaning of the word modernity. For he to whom the present is the only thing that is present knows nothing of the age in which he lives. To realize the 19th century, one must realize every century that has preceded it and that has contributed to its making. To know anything about oneself, one must know about all others. There must be no mood with which one cannot sympathize, no dead mode of life that one cannot make alive. Is this impossible? I think not. By revealing to us the absolute mechanism of all action, and so freeing us from the self-imposed and trammeling burden of moral responsibility, the scientific principle of heredity has become, as it were, the warrant for contemplative life. It has shown us that we are never less free than when we try to act. It has hemmed us round with the nets of the hunter, and written upon the wall with the prophecy of our doom. We may not watch it, for it is within us. We may not see it, save a mirror that mirrors the soul. It is Nemesis without her mask. It is the last of the fates and the most terrible. It is the only one of the gods whose real name we know. And yet, while in the sphere of practical and external life it has robbed energy of its freedom and activity of its choice, in the subjective sphere, where the soul is at work, it comes to us, this terrible shadow, with many gifts in its hands, gifts of strange temperaments and subtle susceptibilities, gifts of wild ardors and chill moods of indifference, complex multiform gifts of thoughts that are at variance with each other, and passions that war against themselves. And so, it is not our own life that we live, but the lives of the dead, and the soul that dwells within us is no single spiritual entity, making us personal and individual, created for our service, and entering into us for our joy. It is something that has dwelt in fearful places, and in ancient sepulchres has made its abode. It is sick with many maladies, and has memories of curious sins. It is wiser than we are, and its wisdom is bitter. It fills us with impossible desires, and makes us follow what we know we cannot gain. One thing, however earnest, it can do for us. It can lead us away from surroundings whose beauty is dimmed to us by the mist of familiarity, or whose ignoble ugliness and sordid claims are marring the perfection of our development. It can help us to leave the age in which we were born, and to pass into other ages, and find ourselves not exiled from their air. It can teach us how to escape from our experience, and realize the experience of those who are greater than we are. The pain of Leopardi crying out against life becomes our pain. Theocritus blows on his pipe, and we laugh with the lips of the nymph and shepherd. In the wolfskin of Pierre Vidal, we flee before the hounds, and in the armor of Lancelot we ride from the bower of the queen. We have whispered the secret of our love beneath the cowl of Abelard, and in the stained raiment of Villon have put our shame into song. We can see the dawn through Shelley's eyes, and when we wander with Endymion, the moon grows amorous of our youth. Ours is the anguish of the Atis, and ours is the weak rage and noble sorrows of the Dane. Do you think that it is the imagination that enables us to live these countless lives? Yes, it is the imagination. And the imagination is the result of heredity. It is simply concentrated race experience. But where in this is the function of the critical spirit? The culture that this transmission of racial experiences makes possible can be made perfect by the critical spirit alone, and indeed may be said to be one with it. For who is the true critic but he who bears within himself the dreams and ideas and feelings of myriad generations, and to whom no form of thought is alien, no emotional impulse obscure, and who the true man of culture, if not he, who by fine scholarship and fastidious rejection has made instinct self-conscious and intelligent, and can separate the work that has distinction from the work that has it not, and so by contact and comparison makes himself master of the secrets of style and school, and understands their meanings, and listens to their voices, and develop that spirit of disinterested curiosity which is the real root, as it is the real flower, of the intellectual life, and thus attains to intellectual clarity, and having learned the best that is known and thought in the world, lives, it is not fanciful to say so, with those who are the immortals. Yes, Ernest, the contemplative life, the life that has for its aim not doing but being, and not being merely but becoming. That is what the critical spirit can give us. The gods live thus, either brooding over their perfection, as Aristotle tells us, or as Epicurus fancied, watching with the calm eyes of the spectator the tragi-comedy of the world that they have made. We too might live like them, and set ourselves to witness with appropriate emotions the varied scenes that man and nature afford. We might make ourselves spiritual by detaching ourselves from action, and become perfect by the rejection of energy. It has often seemed to me that Browning felt something of this. Shakespeare hurls Hamlet into active life and makes him realize his mission by effort. Browning might have given us a Hamlet who would have realized his mission by thought. Incident and event were to him unreal or unmeaning. He made the soul the protagonist of life's tragedy and looked on action as the one undramatic element of a play. To us, at any rate, the life of contemplation is the true ideal. From the high tower of thought we can look out at the world. Calm and self-centered and complete, the aesthetic critic contemplates life. And no arrow drawn at a venture can pierce between the joints of his harness. He is at least safe. He has discovered how to live. Is such a mode of life immoral? Yes, all the arts are immoral, except those baser forms of sensual or didactic art that seek to excite to action of evil or of good. For action of every kind belongs to the sphere of ethics. The aim of art is simply to create a mood. Is such a mode of life unpractical? Ah, it is not so easy to be unpractical as the ignorant Philistine imagines. It were well for England if it were so. There is no country in the world so much in need of unpractical people as this country of ours. With us, thought is degraded by its constant association with practice. Who that moves in the stress and turmoil of actual existence, noisy politician or brawling social reformer, or poor or narrow-minded priest blinded by the sufferings of that unimportant section of the community among whom he has cast his lot, can seriously claim to be able to form a disinterested intellectual judgment about any one thing? Each of the professions means a prejudice. The necessity for a career forces everyone to take sides. We live in the age of the overworked and the undereducated, the age in which people are so industrious that they become absolutely stupid. And harsh though it may sound, I cannot help but saying that such people deserve their doom. The sure way of knowing nothing about life is to try and make oneself useful. A charming doctrine, Gilbert. I'm not sure about that, but it has at least the minor merit of being true. That is, the desire to do good to others produces a plentiful crop of prigs, is the least of the evils of which it is the cause. The prig is very interesting psychological study, and though of all poses a moral pose that is the most offensive, still to have a pose at all is something. It is a formal recognition of the importance of treating life from a definite and reasoned standpoint. That humanitarian sympathy wars against nature by securing the survival of the failure may make the man of science loathe its facile virtues. The politician, the political economist may cry out against it for putting the improvident on the same level as the provident, and so robbing life of the strongest because most sordid incentive to industry. But in the eyes of the thinker, the real harm that emotional sympathy does is that it limits knowledge, and so prevents us from solving any single social problem.